Hello and welcome. And we're here at Holistic Investments, and I'm your host, Konstantin Kogan. And I'm really delighted to have our amazing guest today, Lili Infante, who's the CEO of CAT Labs. And she was a special agent in the U.S. Department of Justice before. So we're going to talk about cybersecurity, investigations, and how can you prevent yourself from being hacked or from being attacked by cyber criminals in today's world. Really glad to have you here, Lili. Hi.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Likewise. And traditionally, we're going to throw this legal disclaimer in between the lines so that it will be very clear that this content is for informational purposes only. You should not consider any such information or any other material as legal, investment, financial, or any other advice. So, and also no tax advice, of course. So now we're off the hook. We're going to talk about like a lot of fun stories. So you have a really interesting transition from being at a cushy job, like, and rarely, as we talked with you about it offline, right? You know, the people from the agencies, like, you know, as Department of Justice, being in a very good position, actually go and start up your own business. So we're going to talk about this transition, and I know you pioneered, like, you know, one of the first official cyber investigation task force, like, you know, and your focus was specifically cryptocurrencies. I know you worked a lot on different cases, so tell us a little bit about like who you are, about your story. How did you get into crypto, and what was your passion?
Absolutely. So I first heard about crypto in January of 2012 from an episode of The Good Wife. It's a TV show, and the episode was called Bitcoin for Dummies. So that was my first introduction to Bitcoin and what it was. And after I watched the episode, I was very intrigued, and I actually started looking into it a little bit more. And I actually joined a meetup in Miami here, where I am now to this day, where sometimes we would meet up. It would be like 3 or 4 of us, and we would just discuss Bitcoin and the technology and where it's going. It was very, very early on, mostly like cypherpunk type crowd. And now it's 30,000 people at a conference instead of 3. So it's definitely changed out here in Miami.
What year was that?
Say it again?
What year was that?
2012.
Mm-hmm.
So that was 2012, yeah. And then that same year, that's when I joined Department of Justice, and I was put into my first assignment at a money laundering group. And so the money laundering group essentially investigated money laundering organizations that cleaned money for large criminal enterprises like drug cartels, terrorist organizations, etc. So I learned everything there was to know about money laundering and how these big global enterprises, criminal enterprises, launder money. And when I learned about this, I kind of started realizing that they're taking a big risk, and it's very expensive for them to launder money. It takes almost sometimes over 30% of their revenue to clean money that they get from their illicit activities, from all of the traditional techniques that they use. And not to mention that it's very risky. They get arrested all the time. It's not exactly discreet to be walking around with a duffel bag full of cash. So, and especially going into a bank, trying to deposit a duffel bag full of cash to make it look legitimate. So a lot of these techniques that they use expose them to a lot of risk of getting arrested and exposed, etc. And it was just very expensive. And so I was kind of thinking about it from the point of view of there has to be a better way. And why are they using all these archaic, crazy, expensive, risky techniques to launder money? And because I had just learned about Bitcoin a few months prior from the episode of The Good Wife, I thought, man, Bitcoin would be perfect for these guys to use as a money laundering technique, because you transfer value across borders quickly and efficiently and cheaply, and there's no intermediary. There's no bank that has any kind of AML or KYC or any kind of money laundering program that you have to worry about. It's peer-to-peer, right? And it's an instantaneous transfer from one country to another. So I thought, they have to be using, somebody's got to be using Bitcoin at that point to launder money. So this is like around 2013, 2014 is when I started kind of looking into that. And I asked around and I didn't see any of the traditional criminal organizations using Bitcoin at that time to launder money. But what I did hear about, what I started hearing about when I asked around, is Bitcoin being used on the dark web. So that was one of the first use cases for Bitcoin, is criminal use on the dark web, on dark web markets. So that completely fascinated me. The dark web market space, I started looking into what dark web markets were, how they operate, etc. So that was kind of my entry into that world of my personal interest in crypto, plus my career, and where my career was taking me kind of converged at that point. And I started looking into crypto as it was being used on the dark web and for criminal purposes. And I made the prediction at that time that it's going to be used by traditional criminal organizations eventually, like terrorists and drug cartels, etc., when they get the memo that it's a lot easier and faster, and when they start learning the technology. And it actually did happen eventually.
And you know, it's actually fascinating that this was your way to enter the market, right? You know, because it reminds me of the episode with an interview of Elon Musk, that where he infamously, like, you know, he actually said that Bitcoin is a perfect tool for money laundering. However, it has some other utilities, right? So ironically, when we look at the Chainalysis, right, which is an official data and reports, they show Bitcoin, like, you know, is not that often used right now for money laundering, right? It's hard to, of course, to get the more accurate data, right? You know, but like right now, there are much different ways how to do it more efficiently, naming Monero and many other privacy coins, right? So, but that was your way to get into the market. Now, we talked a little bit about the that you actually help to protect the retail investors, and specifically U.S., you know, citizens who were sometimes in trouble by like various scams, right? So I want to ask you, like, what was the biggest case that you were working on, and was it like a success story, right? You know, that you can share. Obviously, if there's something confidential you cannot share, great, but like, you know, at least what you can tell us.
So the biggest case is not the most interesting case. So the biggest case was the takedown of the largest and longest running dark web market called Hydra Market. Hydra Market was responsible for about 80% of all dark web cryptocurrency transactions. And also it was a massive crypto money laundering platform for hackers and ransomware actors, malware actors, etc. But yes, that was probably the largest and most splashy case that I worked. But the most interesting and fun case that I worked was actually when I took down a administrator of a dark web market many years ago. His name was Oxymonster. That was the moniker, or the you know, the secret moniker that he went by on the dark web. Mm-hmm. And just to paint a picture of what I was dealing with at the time. So a dark web market. So I'll give you kind of a brief overview of what it is and why it's so interesting. So a dark web market is essentially like an Amazon or an eBay, but for illegal stuff. And it's fascinating when you look at it, because it literally operates as a regular business. It has, you know, almost like a CEO. It has an engineering team. It has an operations team. It has a customer service team, and just like a regular business, right? But the only difference is that all the stuff that's being sold on this dark web market, on this hidden service, they call it also hidden service, is illegal. So you can buy drugs, you can buy malware, you can buy phishing bots, hacking tools, ransomware, you can buy stolen identities, child pornography, primarily drugs, right? So like if you, let's say that you want to buy heroin from Mexico. All you do is type in heroin Mexico, and you'll get multiple listings of vendors on this market that will sell you heroin, and it'll get shipped to your door. And you never have to leave the house. You never have to deal with gangs on the streets or anything like that. It's just like the user experience is very similar to that of Amazon. The main
But
difference.
how do they bypass, sorry to interrupt you, but how do they bypass customs? Because, like one can believe that the customs can, scan, right, especially now with a lot of like developed technology, they should scan the items, right? So how do they do that?
Well, they just don't have the resources or the technology to scan every single thing. So yes, some of them get ripped off by customs. Some of them, get discovered, but most of them go through. The majority of the drugs and illegal things that go through the Postal Service go through. And as a matter of fact, they don't have ideally, I would like to have at every sorting facility, I would have a canine dog sniffing all the packages to see if there's any drugs in the packages, but they don't even do that. They have to have some kind of tip or probable cause to go in and search and get an actually dog to smell for drugs. So it's not within our legal framework, it's not an easy task to intercept these packages. So most of them will actually go through. And it's ironic because it's basically the Postal Service is like a facilitator of these drug dealers, right? They'll deliver it to your door, which is crazy. But it's pretty crazy when you start looking into it, how openly the vendors of drugs, these drug dealers on the internet, advertise their illicit goods, drug dealers and other illicit actors. Essentially, the listing will say, this is black tar heroin, fresh straight from Mexico, shipping 5 days. We have this much in stock, and we're going to get more stock later on. These are the terms of service. These are the refund terms.
Policy. Right? Oh my God.
Yeah, refund policy. Everything just like a regular market. Not only that, they have an escrow service to protect buyers from being scammed by the vendors. Because if you're a buyer and you get scammed by the vendor, let's say you order cocaine and you get sugar instead, and that happens over and over again, you're not going to use that market. So the market has to put some controls in place to make sure that there's a trust system, basically, right, between the buyer and the seller.
Yeah, so they're also implementing review systems so that almost like 5 stars, 4 stars, right?
Absolutely, yes. Every vendor has a reputation. Every vendor has a star system, reviews. If you order cocaine, you receive it quickly. It's good quality. You write a review, great stuff. We'll order again. The best cocaine I've ever had. It's like that. The reviews look like that. It's really crazy. Yeah. It's like Twilight Zone.
And you mentioned that ironically, the name of this market was Dream Market, right? Which is also very ironic about the way they name it. They're very creative people. And one thing that actually really disturbing, that those are really smart people. So if they were to run a regular business, they would probably be equally successful, maybe not that successful, but they would do well, right? However, for whatever reason, I don't know which movies are they watching and which problematic childhood they have. They decide to go and pursue illicit activity and actually build huge operations. Can you talk a little bit about what size are we talking about? I don't know if you measure it in millions of dollars or packages shipped, what are the statistics, if you can share a few words?
Sure. So if you look at the biggest dark web marketplaces, billions of dollars. So for example, Hydra was a $5 billion marketplace, and it had hundreds of thousands, probably up to 1 million vendors and buyers that were buying and selling illicit goods and services on that market. And these are very challenging cases because, first of all, because it's a dark web market, and kind of a definition of a dark web market is it's a hidden service that's hosted on a anonymous browser, usually the Tor browser, which basically hides the location of the servers of the market and also hides the location of the users of the market. So when you use the Tor browser and you go on the hidden service of the dark web market and you create your account, just like you would with eBay or Amazon, the market doesn't actually see where you're logging in from, right? So it's like a double anonymity, and nobody on the market is using their real identities. Everybody's using monikers. Communications are encrypted. It's a really challenging type of case to work because everybody's just anonymous, encrypted. It's a very technically challenging case to work. So the dark web market is a massive enterprise, and not only is it used for the sale of illicit goods and services, it's also used for money laundering. So even if you're not selling on the market, you can, let's say if you're a ransomware actor or you're a hacker, you can actually funnel cryptocurrency through that market. You'll send it to the market and you'll send it back out of the market. And that way you kind of break the chain, because the market acts as like a dark pool, and it breaks that chain of the blockchain, so you can't trace it anymore, right? So, and you obviously you can't subpoena the market and say, hey, who did this transaction? Because it's all criminals, right? So,
because you have hard times even finding the CEO of the company, right?
yeah, not only that, the crazy part is that in a traditional investigation, it's a very hierarchical structure. And even the way in which you conduct a traditional investigation, let's say it's a drug cartel, usually you would target a lower level drug dealer, and you would arrest that lower level drug dealer. You would flip them against their boss. Usually that drug dealer knows who their boss is, knows where the boss is, and will give you a lot of information about who the boss is, so you can go after the boss. And then you do the same thing with the boss, and then you get to the big fish. And with the dark web market, nobody knows who each other is. There's multiple employees that work for the dark web market: customer service, operations, engineering, the main administrators, right? And none of them know where or who they're working with. None of their all of their coworkers are completely anonymous. So if you take down one of them, you can't get to the bigger fish, because they don't know who the bigger fish is.
So is it fair to assume that most of the people who are recruited by this organization, that they are also users? Because how else would you actually know about this opportunity?
A lot of times, yes. A lot of times the people that are recruited to be employees of the market will be vendors first. So maybe they'll sell stolen Netflix accounts, for example. I'm 100% sure the majority of people in this world, their Netflix login information is being sold on the dark web. Like, I know my stuff was being sold on the dark web. If you look hard enough, I'm sure your stuff is being sold on the dark web. Your identity, your login credentials, everything.
So how would you even know that? That's the good question, you know, like which is important.
How would you what?
How would you know if your information is being sold on the dark web?
It's not easy. It's not easy to know, because usually you can go on the dark web and you'll find, let's say, a vendor that sells stolen identities, or you find a vendor that sells stolen Netflix accounts. And even if you buy stolen Netflix accounts, they'll just give you a list of accounts. So you don't like, it's not really open, right? Necessarily for you to see whose account was stolen, whose account was not stolen. They don't provide that information until you pay for the product. So it's not easy to tell, but I'm telling you that it's very likely the majority of people's Netflix accounts have been stolen.
Oh no, unfortunately, I don't doubt it. Like, that's the saddest part. Like, you go through so much risk to actually get, like, you know, especially in a Netflix account or eBay account, right? There's not, like, eBay, at least you can buy some stuff, right? You know, like, but in Netflix, you can just use it and maybe you can save some few bucks, right? You know, so that's not a huge upside for the risk you're taking, right? And I've seen people are selling credit cards, you know, like they sell, like, you know, social securities, like, you know, like a lot of the stuff, like, you know, that like some of the, and actually they bluntly also nowadays, what I've been like, whatever, like witnessed is Telegram groups, right? Which is also encrypted. And there's like huge groups, which are, they're deleted and they're up and up again. And you've been just forcefully, like, you've been invited to them, and there's all kind of stuff, weapons, drugs, as you mentioned, right? And it's crazy how available it is right now, and the like if you're talking about like $5 billion business, that can be listed on NASDAQ, right? It reminds me of like episode of what like Breaking Bad, right? When he like, so and like those are the things which are definitely what I'm like, again, I want to bring up too many conspiracy theories, but I don't believe it's possible without actually some actors on the other side of the like, aisle, which we're talking about, like banks, governments, and other players. Because if you, as you mentioned, to have an escrow account, you need to have a processing payment actor who would actually receive those like high risk transactions. It's impossible to do it unless you have someone, right?
Oh, actually, no, it's not. Not on the dark web market. So on the dark web market, the market itself acts as an escrow. So the way the escrow works is when you, let's say you want to buy cocaine from a vendor on Dream Market. So you go in, you order your drugs, you pay with Bitcoin, you tell them, you encrypt your address with pretty good privacy encryption, and then the drugs get sent to your door. Now, that vendor doesn't get the money, doesn't get your Bitcoin. It gets stored in an escrow account that's managed by the market until you release the escrow. So once you get your drugs and the drugs are good, then you can log in back to the market and say, okay, yes, good. I got my drugs, everything is good. Now, if you got sugar instead of cocaine, you can actually do a dispute. You can file a dispute with the market and say, hey, I got sugar instead of cocaine. I need my money back. And then there's a moderator that will moderate this dispute between the vendor and the buyer. And if you can prove that you got sugar instead of cocaine, that moderator will give you your money back and the vendor never gets the money. So that kind of mitigates that immutability of Bitcoin transactions, right? Mm-hmm. Because in the regular world, there's no intermediary, but the market itself acts as an escrow. And that's why every single transaction that happens on the market, the administrators get paid a percentage of that transaction. That's why they get really, really rich, because there's $5 billion worth of transactions and they get a cut of every single one, because they are not only providing a platform for everybody to meet and trade, but they also are providing an escrow service to protect the buyers from getting scammed by the sellers. And if the buyer doesn't finalize the transaction and doesn't release the escrow, after usually about 14, 15 days, the escrow gets released automatically to the vendor. So if I don't log back into the market and release it, it gets automatically released after a couple of weeks. So it's a kind of a trust system that's built in an escrow system, and it's managed by the market. So there's no like actually traditional financial system kind of payment processor intermediary involved in this process.
Got it. I thought we were also talking about not only Bitcoin as an escrow, but also potentially US dollars or any other currencies, right? So it's rare that fiat currencies are used for those markets.
Never.
Right? Never. Okay.
Never.
Then it makes sense.
For that reason. Yeah, for that reason, because you need an intermediary. It's not a it's not a peer-to-peer digital currency. So that's for that reason you can't use it and they won't use it.
So let me ask you, you mentioned that it took you 3 years to actually find this person, right? So can you help us to understand what were the techniques, and how did you actually got him eventually?
So without revealing too much, because I don't want to reveal too many trade secrets for investigative
it's
techniques.
Like not a tutorial for people who are doing the illicit activities, how not to do, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. But so I look at, Oxymonster was an administrator, a head administrator. He was kind of like a chief operating officer of this massive billion-dollar marketplace. With hundreds of thousands of listings for different illicit goods and services. And I look at Oxymonster as a digital modern day kingpin. You know how Chapo Guzman or Pablo Escobar, those are like legacy kingpins. So Oxymonster is like a digital kingpin, like modern day. And the reason I consider him as a kingpin is because he is receiving profits from billions of dollars of illicit goods and services, primarily drugs, being sold globally on this platform, and he's maintaining this platform, right? So he's a big deal. Like, this is a big target for us. And the investigative technique that's used to target a dark web administrator is very different from investigative techniques used to target a traditional kingpin, which, as I mentioned before, it's very hierarchical. You get the small guy, and then you get to the bigger guy, and the bigger guy, and finally to the kingpin. Here, you have to kind of do a shotgun approach with you target the administrators, you target the biggest, most dangerous vendors, so the ones that are selling fentanyl, the ones, you know, that are selling like child pornography, like things that are really, really bad, and you just don't want these people to continue operating. So you start doing that to establish venue, mostly in your jurisdiction where you're investigating from, because dark web market is global, right? And then you have to establish a jurisdiction because you're prosecuting out of the United States. So in order to establish that jurisdiction, you actually have to do undercover deals with the vendors on the marketplace. And those undercover deals, if it's drug deals, for example, they have to get sent to your area of jurisdiction. So in this case, for me, it was Miami. So I would do multiple undercover drug deals, and the drugs would get sent to Miami, and now I have jurisdiction in Miami, right? It doesn't matter where the vendor is, doesn't matter where the administrator is, because they're selling to someone in Miami. That's it. Now I have jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. Now, if they were preventing you from being able to buy if you're in Miami or if you're in the United States in general, then that's a different story. That would be a lot more difficult to get jurisdiction. But usually they won't prevent you. So that's how we approach it. We go after the biggest, most dangerous vendors that are selling on the platform. We go after the administrators. So we kind of start identifying, okay, who are the main administrators that are running this marketplace and that are running the escrow, running the customer service, running the engineering part, everything. Like, what is the hierarchical structure? And we also look at the money laundering organizations that are facilitating the money laundering of the proceeds from this activity as well. So it's kind of like we're targeting everybody at the same time, as opposed to going from little guy to bigger guy to bigger guy to bigger guy, right? So the way that we start targeting the administrator and the way that we started targeting OxyMonster is he was actually on a dark web forum, which was the Dream Market Forum, where the administrators would make announcements about certain features of the market. Or let's say there was the market would be down or deposits are not working, something like that. So they would make announcements on this forum, and also the buyers and sellers can also talk about the market in general on this forum. So on this forum, you can see who the most active administrators are. And OxyMonster was basically the most active administrator on this, on the Dream Market Forum. And we could tell that he was one of the biggest kind of players on this administrative kind of leadership scheme of this market. Now, what do we know from looking at his profile? So we know his username, which is OxyMonster, and we see the post that he posts on and the announcements that he makes on the market. So we kind of start realizing, okay, what is it that his role is? How long has he been working on the market? So OxyMonster is one of the earliest employees or earliest administrators of the market. And he was like very customer facing. And then you also look at his language and how he speaks. So you kind of start building a profile. Okay, is he, because you don't have anything else to go off of, right? It's just a name and posts, right? So you kind of start building a profile. Okay, is this a man or a woman? Is this, maybe how old is this man or woman? Is this a native English speaker?
Yes. Okay. Or not. Right.
Yeah, exactly. You see where I'm going with this. Is this a native English speaker or not a native English speaker? And if it is a native English speaker, is it like European English, or is it American English or Australian English? So like you start looking at some patterns, and and that's kind of how you start building a profile. Okay, I think this may be a male based on some of the comments that he made. I think this may be somebody whose English is not their native language, things like that. And so we had that, and the way that we were able to identify him eventually was a combination of some blockchain analytics. So he actually ended up putting a tip jar wallet address into his signature box for his messages on this forum and on the market itself. And in addition to that, he also sold drugs on Dream Market as well. So he wasn't just an administrator, he also on the side was a drug dealer on that marketplace as well. And when we looked at his profile, on his drug dealing profile, he actually put tags in his profile that said French, France, Oxy. He was selling Oxy, Adderall, like things that he would get from his doctor. He would have multiple doctors, he would get prescriptions and basically sell them on the dark web. As a hobby, like he wasn't like a huge drug dealer. His main job was to administer the market, but he was also doing that on the side. He was doing a little bit of drug dealing on the side. But he did have this French France tag on his profile, kind of like when you do a YouTube video and you tag your video so other people can find you. So he had the same thing. So if you're like in France and you want some Oxy, you can find his profile really easy to buy some Oxy from him. So that's how we kind of started realizing, okay, this guy's maybe he's French. But the way that we actually got to his identity was through this tip jar that he left on the signature line of his messages, including on his dark web vendor profile and on the forum where he was acting as the administrator. And this tip jar, he said that this was the Dream Market tip jar for the staff of Dream Market. So the tip jar is often used by vendors and administrators and moderators of the market if they did a good job or if they, over delivered for you. You can give them a little something extra, right? You can send them a little bit of Bitcoin to their tip jar. So he had this tip jar, and I ended up tracing it using some tracing tools, ended up tracing it to a centralized exchange that had some information about his real identity. So I ended up, doing a subpoena to the centralized exchange and getting some information. Now, it took me about 8 months to get information from this exchange because this exchange was kind of semi-compliant. It wasn't the best. It didn't have the best compliance program. And it was also not in the United States. So it took a while to go through all the steps I needed to go through to get to the exchange and for them to give me information about the user. And once I got the information, I got his real name and his, identity and everything like that, his email and phone number, address, and then I could then do a reverse lookup on some of the databases that we've already seized, like some of the marketplaces that we've already seized in the past. And his name came up, and I'd made more links to another dark web identity that he used. He actually used his real name because he was buying I think Viagra or Cialis or something like that on the dark web. So he used his real name and address and didn't encrypt it. So this was very early on where he didn't have very good OPSEC. So before he became this like big administrator. And like you said, a lot of times they will be a buyer first or a vendor first, and then they will kind of graduate into being an administrator or an employee of the market. So that was his progression. And then I gathered a lot more intelligence on him, and I made a lot more links to his dark web activity, including from like the transactions that were in that, from that cryptocurrency exchange, and also payments that were made to him from the market, from the dark web market, etc. So he also had a very active online presence as a regular person. So his real identity he had Instagram, Twitter, he had all these different accounts. And then he had his dark web identity. And so I could gain some pretty good intelligence on him and where he is and what he's up to and what he's doing just from his public profiles. And so I had all of this evidence, and this is not all of the evidence that I had that I just described, but I had a pretty big compilation of evidence, and it took over 2 years to gather all this evidence. And after literally the day that I identified him, I found out that he was in France, and there's no extradition treaty with France. So if he stayed in France, I couldn't indict him and arrest him and bring him to the United States. I could indict him, but I couldn't extradite him to the United States. Mm-hmm. So our prosecutor just wouldn't do it, because why? Why is he not? Why are we going to indict him if we can't actually arrest him? Right. So they make that kind of determination on a case-by-case basis. And so now I had a challenge. I said, okay, well, he's in France, I'm in the US. What am I going to do? And then literally a couple of days after I identified him, I found out that he was coming to the United States. He was applying for a visa, for a tourist visa, to come to the United States. And that was supposed to happen literally 2 weeks after I identified him. So I spent 2.5 years, almost 3 years, trying to identify him. I identify him, and 2 weeks later, he's supposed to come to the US. It's like synchronicity, wow. Serendipity, Karma. So it's almost like it was meant to be. I was like the messenger of God at this point, I have to move forward. I have to, the doors are open. I have to swim them wide open and walk through at this point. So I thought, man, he's applying for a visa to come to the US. Why the hell would he do that? Because he knows what happened to the last dark web market administrator, Ross Albright, when he got prosecuted for his crimes in the United States. He got a life sentence in prison. Why would he knows the United States is very, very strict on dark web administrators, because they consider them a kingpin, right? They're facilitating billions of dollars of illicit transactions. And so I'm like, why is he coming to the US? And from my review of his social media profile, all of his social media profiles, he was very into facial hair. He was very into his beard. Okay. He was obsessed.
Why not Turkey?
He was obsessed with his beard. That's all he talked about, is all the little potions that he hand makes to make his beard nice and shiny and grow as long and beautiful and luscious as he possibly can. Okay. So that was big stuff. So I said, okay, this guy is obsessed with his beard. So this has to, why is he risking his entire life to come to the United States? It has to be beard related. It has to be something to do with the beard, because he's so passionate about it. So I saw that he listed on his visa application that he was going to be staying in Austin, Texas. And so I was like, okay, what is happening in Austin, Texas on this date that he's going to be there that's related to facial hair? And lo and behold, it was the World Beard and Mustache Championship. So that's why he was coming to the United States. You see why this is my favorite case, because you can't make this up. This is amazing.
This is hilarious.
Right. So he was coming to participate in the World Beard and Mustache Championship in Austin, Texas. So I thought, okay, and then his hotel was literally across the street from the actual conference venue. I said, okay, well, I need to go get an arrest warrant for this guy, because this is my only chance. I'm not going to have another chance. He lives in France, non-extraditable country. He's coming to the US. First time he's ever been to the US. He's never been to the US in his entire life. First time he's coming, 2 weeks after I identify him. And this is my only chance. So I go to my prosecutors. I say, okay, this is all the evidence we have, lots of evidence. I need an arrest warrant to arrest him as he lands in the United States. And the prosecutor is like, well, it's a lot, but at the same time, he's foreign. So when we have a foreign target, we have to make sure, because, this is our relationship with another country. So it's not just law enforcement anymore. This is like diplomatic relations. So when we have somebody from another country coming and we're arresting them, the case needs to be like ironclad on a silver platter, everything, no doubt in anybody's mind. So they were like, we need a little bit more. We need something a little bit more just to get us to that point of giving you an arrest warrant. And I was like, okay, fine. So, and then, this is the dynamic that we have with the prosecutors. We bring them the case and they say, I don't know, because they're the ones that have to actually argue this case in court, right? So they're the ones that decide if there's enough if enough evidence or probable cause to prosecute. So what I did, I told him, look, I think I can get you a little bit more. And one of the main things that we needed to do is to tie his real life identity to his dark web identity in another way. So like we had some ties, but we needed more, or they wanted more. And so that there couldn't be any doubt in anybody's mind that Oxymonster is Gal Valerius, which was his real name. And there was no doubt. If it goes to trial, there's no doubt this is the guy. So I said, okay, well, how about his writing style? We have thousands of posts from the dark web market, from the forum, from Oxymonster, and we have thousands of posts from his real life social media. Why don't we hire a forensic linguist, and why don't we do an authorship analysis? And the forensic linguist can tell us with a degree of probability whether it's the same author, whether Oxymonster and Gal Valerius is the same author, based on this very wide body of text that we have. So they're like, okay, yeah, that could work. Because I also noticed, from the reason I kind of came up with this idea is I noticed that he had some linguistic patterns that were very similar in his social media and in his dark web posts, right? So for example, he would use cheers a lot, or he would use 2 exclamation points a lot. Like there's like little things here and there that were very similar and peculiar.
Patterns.
And yeah, patterns, unique enough to say, okay, yeah, this looks like the same guy is writing this. But I'm not an expert. This is just from like a regular person's view. So we need to take this to an expert with like 30 years of experience doing forensic linguistic analysis. So that's what we did. We took it to an expert, and the expert, it was actually pretty incredible. The expert not only said that, yes, there's a really high, like over 95% probability that this is the same author from the social media accounts and the dark web accounts, he also built a profile of the individual. And this forensic linguist didn't have access to the actual identity of the person. He just had access to the text, right? But from the text, he could build a profile. And he said, this looks like not a native English speaker, looks like probably Hebrew is their native language. They're probably Israeli, probably in their probably a man, probably in their 30s. So it's like, it was actually incredible from just the text, how much they could garner from that information, from the way that somebody speaks online. They can actually build a profile and say, are you a man? How old are you? What is your native language? Is English your first language? So it was very, very interesting. So we got that. I take it to the prosecutor. I'm like, jackpot, we got this. And the prosecutor is like, I don't know. I feel like it's still not enough. I'm like, oh my gosh, goodness gracious. Okay. So my only chance here was to catch him red-handed as he was landing in Atlanta. So he was going to land in Atlanta and then go take a plane to Dallas. So that my only chance was to get additional evidence as he was landing in Atlanta. And if I couldn't get additional evidence, I would have had to go to Dallas and do physical surveillance and do a lot of different investigative techniques to try to get more evidence that he is who we say he is, that Gal Valerius is Oxymonster. So I devised a plan of action. So we were going to meet him at the airport. And during his flight, as he was in the air from Paris to Atlanta, we actually went on the dark web market and we went onto his profile and we ordered drugs from him. And we wanted to see, and actually on the dark web market, it tells you when somebody is online. So we wanted to see if he was online while he's in the air. If he's not online, because usually he was online at least once or twice a day. If he's not online, and actually probably even more because he was an administrator, but if he's not online, that means kind of gives us a little bit extra evidence that, okay, he wasn't online because he was on the plane at this time during these like 8 hours, right? And it's like, basically these cases, a lot of times it's a compilation of circumstantial evidence. So it's little pieces of evidence here and there that just make the case a lot more airtight, where only one of those pieces of evidence wouldn't be enough, but everything together in aggregate gives you enough probable cause. So that's kind of what we were dealing with here. So we ordered drugs from him and we wanted to see if he logs in while he's in the flight. If he logged in, we were going to do a subpoena of the Wi-Fi on the airplane. So we had a whole plan. If he didn't log in and then he went on to Austin, then, you know, we would have done physical surveillance of him as he was there in Austin doing his beard competition. So that was the plan. That was like plan B, but plan A was to try to get him to try to get something from him as he lands. So whether it's, you know, do some kind of search, and the beauty of him coming from another country is that Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection, they have border search authority. So they can search you without needing a search warrant because you're crossing the border to the US. And so we can kind of take advantage of this fact. But I had a little hiccup where I told initially CBP or Customs Border Protection that this drug kingpin is coming into the country. And they actually said, well, you know what? Our job is to stop a drug kingpin from coming into this country. So we're actually going to deny his visa. And I was like, so I'm like, wait, hold on a second. That's not good for me, you know, because I need him to come here. And so we didn't have our interests aligned, even though we were both, you know, government agencies, but they don't want a drug kingpin come into the country. And obviously, I want him to come to the country so I can arrest him. So we had to do what's called a silent parole, which usually takes many months, but there's an agent that was my partner from Homeland Security Investigations that was able to get him a silent parole into the country so that they couldn't revoke his visa, essentially. So he could still come to the country. So my devious plan was to meet him at the airport in Atlanta and try to get more information and try to get more evidence from him as he was landing to tie him to OxyMonster. So as he landed with his wife, and he was detained with his wife. Yeah, he was traveling with his wife. And he was detained by Customs and Border Protection, and they did a border search. And essentially they did what's called a ruse. And they said, you know, we have a lot of people from your country that are coming in with child pornography. And we need to check your devices to see if you have any child pornography within your devices. And usually if you don't have child pornography, you're going to be like, here you go. I don't have any of that stuff. Like a lot of times, even if you have other illegal stuff, just to prove that you're not that much of a scumbag, you'll let them search your devices. And also if you don't let them, they'll just take your devices and
do it anyway.
We'll try to get into them, and then you won't have access to your phone or computer. So as they're searching him, I'm kind of standing on the side and I start asking him questions. I'm like, oh, well, you know, where are you going? And he said, oh, I'm going to this beard and mustache championship. And I said, oh, you know, I think you're going to win because your beard is just glorious. It's so beautiful and red. And like, how do you keep it like that? You know, so I was kind of building a little rapport with him. And then, the CBP and HSI officers were like, okay, so what's your password to your phone? We need to check for child porn. And he gave them the password, and they took the devices to the back room and opened them up, and his entire drug enterprise was on his computer, including the PGP key, encryption key that he was using to communicate on the dark web, including that tip jar, that wallet that we found in his account, the Bitcoin wallet with almost $1 million on there, including even a ledger with all of the drug deals that he's done. Basically, everybody that he's ever sold to, he had like the person's address and name and tracking number. So everybody he's ever sold drugs to, and even a ledger of all of the other different administrators and what their jobs were, because he was the main one. So he would, distribute the duties. So everything, everything was on there. So I was like, oh my gosh, jackpot. Yeah. So this is, you can't, if they don't give me an arrest warrant after this, I don't know what. So, but because it was a border search, I had to get an additional search warrant. So I ended up getting a search warrant for the devices so I could actually properly look inside, because once we open it up as a border search, if it's a criminal investigation, I can't really continue looking into that until, or I can't, CBP and HSI can, but I can't until I get a search warrant. So get a search warrant. And also right after I come out and I ask him what the password to his Bitcoin wallet was. He had an Electrum wallet on his computer, but it was password protected. But I knew that it was the same, it was the tip jar basically that he listed, and had, I could see that it had almost $1 million on there. And at that point, he knew the gig was up. He was like, oh, I don't know anything about any password. What are you talking about? So he knew the gig was up at that point. And so then we get the search warrant. And what happened was we extradited him to Florida because that's where he's getting prosecuted out of. And his wife, we sent her back to France because we didn't have enough evidence, even though she was kind of involved, but we didn't have enough evidence to say that she knew what he was doing, right? We had enough evidence on him, but in order to get enough evidence on her, we needed to not only prove that she was involved, let's say crypto transactions, her name was on some accounts, but that she knew what was happening and what she was involved in. So we didn't have that. So we sent her back. And the danger of sending her back is if she had a backup of the private key or seed phrase to that wallet that we found on his computer, then she could just move the money. And so I was rushing against time. After we got the search warrant, we made an image of the laptop. This was a holiday weekend, by the way. So I'm like doing this all on the weekend, trying to image his laptop, and then basically took it home, which I shouldn't have done, but took it home because we were running against time. So took home the image of the computer to actually try to get into the wallet. And I was trying to do this before she got home to France. And also at the same time, the French were doing a search warrant we're trying to get a search warrant for his house in France. So we notified France. We said, hey, we just got your guy. The wife is coming back. Here's all the probable cause you need. If you want to go do a search warrant, go ahead if you feel like it's enough. And that's, so they were preparing to do that as well. And so I'm in my house in my pajamas, literally on the holiday weekend, trying all the different passwords to his Bitcoin wallet. And I had was not expecting that it was any of that effort was going to work. Like I was literally watching Netflix in my pajamas, crossing out the different passwords that I already tried, like different combinations of like his name, last name, his wife's name, dates of birth, like everything, and trying different combinations. So I was like manually brute forcing this password. And after about 2 hours of doing this, by the way, my definition of Netflix and chill, that's the nerd way of Netflix and chilling.
Very different than the traditional one. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm sitting there trying the different passwords, not expecting any of this to work because that would be crazy, right? And all of a sudden the wallet opens up and I'm like, oh my God, I now have access. I'm now all by myself looking at this laptop, at this wallet, having access to over like almost $1 million by myself. And usually, I mean, with traditional assets, you always have a witness if you're dealing with high value assets. But here I'm like at home on the weekend by myself looking at this. Thankfully, I was doing screen captures. So there was a kind of screen video of me actually trying all the different passwords. So everything was recorded. But I start freaking out because I didn't expect this to work. So I called my boss. I said, I think I opened this wallet and I'm like, what do? I guess I need a witness. I need to transfer it to secure custody before the wife gets to France and transfers the money out. So that's what I did. I ended up FaceTiming with my case partner and transferring the Bitcoin into government custody at that point. And in addition to that, this was about a month or even less than a month after the Bitcoin Cash fork happened. And I was such a nerd that I knew about the Bitcoin Cash fork, and most people that I worked with really didn't care about this kind of stuff. So I'm like, you know what? Not only are we getting this Bitcoin, we also need to check the Bitcoin Cash if there's any Bitcoin Cash in that wallet.
Airdrop, right?
Right. And there was. So like we ended up seizing Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash.
Wow.
But it was crazy because the Bitcoin Cash, there was not a lot of like actual UI interfaces available to recover Bitcoin Cash. So the one that was available was on GitHub. It was Electron Cash, and specifically for like an Electrum wallet, right? A fork of the Electrum wallet. So Electron Cash was available on GitHub, and it was like filled with like malware and viruses. So we had to deal with that. It was crazy just recovering the Bitcoin Cash because it was just like so soon after the fork happened. So that was a crazy experience. But then, he was extradited to Florida, and eventually he got 20 years in prison. And so he spent about 5 years in the United States, and then he's now serving the rest of his sentence in France, which was kind of our agreement with him that he could, after 5 years, he could go back to France because French prisons are a lot cushier and nicer. So.
Wow. This is, by the way, not only this is an incredible story, and thank you for doing what you did with, obviously you had a team also, but you were like leading this operation. But this is, by itself is an episode of Netflix, right? So I'm actually honored to hear it, and so that we'll put it live. I mean, this is a fascinating story. Like literally, I first of all, there's so many other questions that I want to ask you. Like in terms of, I'm sure you've seen some crazy things like happening there, because when you go to the nitty-gritty, it's hard to even fathom like what you went through, because like I'm sure when you deal with this crazy amount of like illicit activity, you see things which you would prefer probably not to see, right? So that's one of the things. So other things are this, obviously more unethical things. Like it's really hard to maintain like sane when you're working with such things. And then like I'm really fascinated that you did that. And then I'm sure like other aspect which like I want to emphasize, probably people don't realize that once you achieve this, like I assume, you can prove me wrong maybe, like, but then once you actually achieve this, that would be like, that meant probably for you an amazing opportunity for promotion, right? You probably would have an amazing career if you would continue doing what you were doing, right? And then you still kind of went on, and now you're now leading a successful, you're CEO of a successful cybersecurity, like company, as a conduit to use this time to also talk about like the most popular scams right now and cyber attacks that people endure. And like, can you talk a little bit about like, some of the things that you see on a day-to-day basis, which, we're going to separate into two cohorts. One, you can talk about businesses that's being attacked, big businesses, and also on the retail side on a personal level.
Absolutely. So when it comes to businesses, one of the issues with digital asset businesses is there are not a lot of cybersecurity standards that are in place for them. So they kind of are swimming in the dark. Some of them are getting legacy cybersecurity certifications like SOC 2 Type 2 or ISO certifications. But unfortunately, those don't really protect you against the most popular attack vectors in cryptocurrency. And the most popular attack vectors usually have to do with key management. And this is both for enterprises and individuals. Key management is key, right? When it comes to protecting yourself from getting hacked, scammed, or defrauded. Even if somebody, let's say a hacker gains access to your computer or your system, if you have your key management on point and you have your operational security on point when it comes to protecting your private keys, many times, even if they gain access to your system, which there are many, many different ways in which an attacker can gain access to your computer or your system, even if they do gain access, they won't be able to steal your funds because your keys are protected. So that's what I would focus on, and standardizing key management and operational security is one of the things that I really propagate in the industry, especially for companies, especially for asset managers or hedge funds or people that are actually managing other people's money or custodying other people's money, exchanges, custodians. Or even protocols, because even protocols, when they build DeFi applications or any kind of decentralized application, they still have to think about key management and how their validators manage keys, for example, right? And how many validators do you need in the network? So there's governance attacks that can happen. If let's say you need 4 validators to do something on the network, or to make a decision or proposal or approve a proposal on the network, and 3 of them get compromised because they have bad key management, right? That's bad. That's a really big attack vector. It would be a governance attack. So just standardizing key management across the board, no matter what kind of entity you are, is very, very paramount to maturing this industry and making sure that we move forward and retain trust in this industry, and make sure that people, retail investors or institutional investors or anybody interacting with the ecosystem, actually have trust that and faith that their money is kept safe. Because we do have that with the traditional banking system.
Yes.
Right. And we don't have that with crypto. So the way that I think we solve this problem, and this has been my approach, is there is a standard called CCSS, and I've been talking about it everywhere all the time. Everywhere I go, I talk about CCSS. It's called Cryptocurrency Security Standard. And they have 3 levels of certifications that you can get. Level 1 being secure enough, and level 3 being paranoid security, like lockdown, paranoid, nobody will gain access to your system. So for example, Fireblocks has level 3 CCSS certification. And we want everybody to have this. We want everybody to be certified in CCSS. Everybody who's serious about building a real business, building a real company or product or technology or infrastructure in crypto needs to be certified in CCSS, because this will signal to the industry that they have their cybersecurity on point. And what CCSS focuses on that other cybersecurity standards don't focus on, like SOC or ISO, is specifically cryptocurrency related attack vectors like key management in general, key generation, backup and recovery, and just key protecting your key. Anything that has to do with protecting your key, any contingency plans, disaster recovery, business continuation. If one of your employees, I don't know, evaporates one day or goes rogue, are they the only one that has access to like your private keys to like all of your customer funds? Things like that need to be really worked out when it comes to managing digital assets and securing digital assets, and also just in general operational security, two-factor authentication. How do you actually transact? When a transaction happens, how many people need to be in the loop when a transaction happens? And it also depends on your business. But CCSS really deals with a lot of different cases. And if you're an infrastructure provider, if you're a wallet, if you're an asset manager or custodian that uses different types of technologies in your stack to custody assets or manage assets for other people, or you are just an individual sole proprietor that takes crypto, for example, as a payment method for goods and services, you also should know how to manage your keys properly. So CSS covers all that, mostly focusing operational security, key management. I always say this, these are the main attack vectors. It doesn't matter how a hacker gains access to your system. Even if they do gain access to your system, if your key management is on point, many times they won't be able to steal your money. So that's for businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And for individuals and also for businesses, of social engineering and phishing is kind of the second way, or a lot of times it's a combination of key mismanagement and social engineering that gets people in trouble. And when I say social engineering, is basically human error, right? Is somebody tricks you into giving them your private key or exposing private information that eventually gets them to gain access to your system or to your assets or whatever it is. And there are many ways that this can happen. Just educating yourself on the many ways that this can happen is very important, because that's one of the main ways that people get.
I can attest to that, and yes, I mean, I was a victim. I mean, it's probably one of the first time I'm going to talk about it in public, right? I'm going to use this chance with you, and I'm not feeling bad about it. I think it's, I mean, I did feel bad at the moment, right? It was terrible because for me it was a large sum of money. But I wanna just share really quickly how they do it, right? In my case, I was investor in the Porsche NFT. I know I just like the car, so I wanted to support the cause. And I was working 2 days in a row without almost no sleeping. I was very tired, like my focus was low. And somebody sends me through Twitter, which looks like really like my friend, a direct message with a link look exactly like their website, like literally like copy paste an amazing. I should say that like they did a really good job. Like those guys they know how to copy paste websites. I know for a fact that they do it with exchanges as well. Like really, I've seen this in Gate, Bybit, many other exchanges. Really good job. And then the URL will be like, instead of like .com or I don't know, like .io, or maybe one letter like that you would not even notice. And then you click, you connect your wallet. The moment you connect your wallet, whether it's MetaMask or Trust Wallet, and you actually share the password, the bots are starting to transfer the funds immediately, which is like, in my case, was crazy because it took me split of a second to understand, oh my God, something is wrong here. Let me try to disconnect the wallet. Literally 2 seconds after I did that, because I was a bit confused, like, it's weird, like it doesn't look like a real website. And it was too late. 2 seconds, and immediately they started to take out the money, go multiple bots, like multiple transactions through mixtures, and they're gone. Like, and even if you trace them, which I told you openly, I want to share really quickly, I even hired a firm to build like 28-page document, which would provide it to actually DOJ, United Secret Service. I mean, nothing will help. And I want to just also ask you for an honest opinion on this side. What should be an amount? By the way, it's both for small businesses and for individuals. In my case, after 8 months of investigation, they openly told me, I'm sorry, your amount is not significant. Nobody's going to subpoena another, because they actually found who did it. It was a person in Russia, ironically. But they told us, Russian Secret Service, their intelligence will not cooperate with us. Unfortunately, we're in a state where just impossible. If it would be tens of millions, maybe we would try. Otherwise, not gonna work. So my question to you, an honest one, as a person who work in the system, you know, you see the both sides. What should be even an amount to even waste your precious time and money to go and investigate?
So I think a better question is not what should it be, because it should be any amount that gets stolen should be investigated, and any victim should be heard. Any victim's case should be taken
Correct.
seriously, right?
But that's politically correct. Yeah, I'm asking from the reality perspective that
from reality, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, yeah, I hear you. I understand where you're going with this. So in my ideal world, I would love for every victim to be investigated and heard, and maximum effort to be expended on recovering their funds. Of course, we don't live in the ideal world. One of the main problems is, and I'll give you what the threshold is for US federal government. Usually if it's under $1 million of loss, they will not take it. And it's usually the prosecutor, the federal prosecutor, that just won't take that case, due to the fact that the sentencing or the punishment that the person would get once they catch them is just not worth it. Number one. Number two, the sheer amount of cases that they have to deal with. And of course, the government is not unlimited. They have limited personnel, and they can't scale these investigations very easily. It requires a great deal of technical knowledge and experience to do a crypto case for an agent and a prosecutor and an analyst. So they just can't do it. They just can't do all the cases. So they will just focus on the biggest case, the biggest amounts, and the cases that will bring the most, the most result. So for example, in your case, it went to Russia. They know if they continue putting effort into that, they're just not going to get anything out of it, because it's in Russia. It's a black hole. That's it. Nothing is going to happen to it. Maybe there are chances that maybe they may be tracing it to somewhere else. Maybe that individual that they identified will be traveling. So even if they indict them and they travel somewhere else, they can grab them there and prosecute them. So there are ways to do it, but it's just so hard, and it's a lot harder than a lot of the low-hanging fruit that has a lot more potential to produce indictments, seizures, money getting returned to victims, than a case like this that's just like not as likely to produce a result. So those are a lot of the considerations that go into it, but a lot of it is just like lack of resources and lack of personnel to be able to address everything. And there's just like so many $1 million cases out there that if your case is under $1 million, they have no resources to be able to go after it. And I think the best way of fixing this problem is to focus on empowering local law enforcement, not just federal. So of course, federal, if you have Secret Service or FBI or IRS to take your case, that's amazing. They have a lot of resources, and they have a lot of experts and personnel that know how to do these cases. But what's better is if you have 1 million victims, and each one of these victims can go to the local police department and somebody can help them at the local police department level, and they don't have those $1 million thresholds, that would be ideal. We can empower local law enforcement to be able to do these cases so that they don't have those big thresholds. That would be really good. And it's a problem that's really dear to my heart. I really hate seeing victims just get so desperate and not being able to get help. And there are many people that are in this industry that are trying to solve this problem. By the way, shout out to Erin West. She's a prosecutor in California, and she is fighting pig butchering and social engineering attacks. Like, she's very passionate about preventing romance scams and pig butchering and crypto and helping those victims. And she's building basically this big public-private sector coalition that helps these kinds of victims. So, and she's just one person, but there's a lot of people that are working on finding solutions to this problem. It's a huge gap. It's a huge gap. Like, I can't even tell you how many victims, federal government has to turn away because they just don't have time. Or you'll go to the FBI website and you submit a complaint, and it's just like one of 10,000, and you have 100 agents that know how to do these cases. What are you going to do? It's just physically impossible.
I hear you.
So,
and what was the saddest part in this? Like, because when the firm, together with this firm, like, we did this investigation, when we found all their wallets and all the chains, we actually seen that they scammed multiple people. Obviously, I was not the only one, because the core wallet that they collected money to and then like funneled to other, like, I don't know, schemes to launder it, obviously, somehow, it was more than, there was 1.3 million. So my question is like, guys, it's actually leading to 7 exchanges that require KYC, know your customer. So you can actually try and go ask, like, the KYC of those, like, people who accepted those funds, and that's how you can do class action lawsuit. And the answer was like, oh, we're sorry, but we cannot disclose you who are the other victims, and then we cannot unite you together. So even my kind of outside of the box thinking led to nothing, which now I accept it as experience, and I'm happy to share with others so that, God forbid, they get into this situation. But my question to you, besides, your friend in California who's doing that, right, and do you believe that in the nearest time we will have some practical tools to somehow, like, prevent this from happening, or at least find a better way to solve this?
So there's a proactive and reactive, right? Proactively building anti-social engineering tools and also educational programs for retail investors and consumers to help them understand what a social engineering attack looks like. That's really important. And it's not easy, because a lot of the people that are victims of, let's say, romance scams or pig butchering scams, they're not in crypto originally. A lot of times they just get contacted randomly from, on Twitter or on WhatsApp or on Instagram, right? And it looks like a pretty Asian woman, and like, I'm a 50-year-old man and I'm lonely, and this pretty Asian woman looks really nice and she's talking to me, and then this pretty Asian woman starts a relationship with me, and I think I'm in love. And now all of a sudden she's telling me about this investment thing that she's been doing, and she's a millionaire, and she's showing me how she has a Lamborghini, and I want a Lamborghini also. And she's telling me how I can be rich, and we can be together forever, rich forever. And then she's teaching me how to use crypto, and she's teaching me how to open up a Coinbase account, and then how to open up a MetaMask account, and how to invest in this amazing mining pool or whatever it is. So that's how it starts, and it's really devastating and really heartbreaking to see and to experience. But the problem is with these kinds of victims is they don't see it coming.
Yes.
Because it's not like they're not already interacting with the crypto ecosystem where somebody already told them, hey, you can be romance scammed or social engineered. No, these people that don't know about crypto at all usually, and they get suckered into it because it's an easy way for the scammer to steal money from them. So that's a big challenge, is targeting those people that don't know crypto, and they just get suckered into it. So, and I always say, like, what is the media that they consume? Are they on Facebook? Are they on, do they watch television? Like, what is the demographic of this victim that we can just do ads or something, or some kind of like, don't do this. If you get a message from a pretty Asian woman on WhatsApp, it's a scam, So it's a challenge on how to bring awareness and education to these types of victims. But overall, I think if you are, as a consumer, if you are dealing with digital assets and you're serious about custodying your own crypto, I think just educating yourself on the different types of ways that you can get scammed, especially via social engineering, like what happened to you, for example, with the fake website, and you thought it was your friend that sent it to you, and it was actually somebody impersonating your friend. Like somebody just impersonated Vitalik from Ethereum, right? Somebody SIM swapped him recently and impersonated him and was able to steal a bunch of money from a bunch of people doing that. And so, you know, there are certain things that are like really obvious that you can teach people. Oh, okay, if you see this, just don't do it. But you also said that you were tired, right? You were tired, you know, your focus was fractured, you know, you haven't slept in a while, and it just slipped, and it just takes a couple of seconds, and you realized in 2 seconds, because it's a bot, it already took your money, so you couldn't get it back. So even when you know, it's hard, but knowing is really good too. You know, so
exactly. And you know what's crazy is, like, you know, there's no bulletproof. You're 100% correct. Like, there's no bulletproof solution. It's just like awareness and trying to make sure, like, they're like, you know, with great power comes a great responsibility. So your wallets, since we're custodying our own wallets, and this is our power, like this is our freedom and I would say one of the core values of decentralization, the responsibility comes to know it. And I take full responsibility. I don't want to blame anyone, right? By the way, one important other, like, I would say cyber attack, like, or whatever you call it, scam, right? You know, so is a honeypot scam. One of my friends like got into it. So basically the way it works, and then you correct me, so they said, like, a malicious actor, they send like a fake token to your wallet, and it's super easy to get. Like, you know, it's, you know, if you know how to read the basic ether scan, you can track holders of one of the top 10 wallets, like one of the top 10 coins, and just do, like, through multi-sender, do an airdrop to 10,000 people. You send few, and they're very smart. They put a pricing so that it looks like it's like $10,000 just dropped on your wallet, and you're like, wow, let me actually go and try to swap it. The moment you do it, you basically are asked to give away the private keys, and that's when they get you and they drain the entire amount from your wallet. So can you talk a little bit about this one, also how to prevent yourself from this attack?
Don't get too excited when if it's too good to be true, it probably is. I think that's the best way to prevent this kind of attack. But so
honeypot scam, that's the name. That's why it probably is.
yeah, no, exactly. So this attack is actually very similar to, is it similar? There's another one that's called address poisoning. It's actually a new one. So address poisoning is a new one that just came out. That's just sweeping everybody by a storm. And it's essentially the perpetrator will do the same thing. They will monitor what you just said. They will monitor like the top 10 wallets, and what they will do is they will airdrop. Sometimes they'll airdrop some tokens that look like real tokens, and the transaction will look like the last transaction that you did when you sent money somewhere. Like if you sent, let's say, some Ethereum to Binance, and they will see, okay, they just sent some Ethereum to Binance, to their Binance account, and the hacker will create an address that has the same beginning and end characters. The middle is a little bit different. Yeah. And that will be the address that they will airdrop with, or they will do a transaction with your account with. And when you go next time, and it's not even this is literally social engineering. It's social engineering. You don't even need to do anything. The next time you go and you want to send money again to Binance, and you remember, oh, I sent money last time to Binance, let me just copy and paste my last transaction, the last wallet address that I used when I sent to Binance, and just copy paste that last address. But it's actually not the last transaction. That transaction was from the hacker. Like the hacker actually transacted with you without you knowing, and the wallet address looks like the address you sent to when you sent to Binance.
Yeah.
And so you just copy paste blindly and you send to Binance and you send to that address, and it's actually a hacker's address and not Binance address. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't, it's just being careful. And the one that the honeypot one is just like, if it looks like it's too good to be true, it probably is. Just don't do that. Just don't do it. It's the easiest way to prevent that one. And then this one is don't blindly copy and paste your last transaction, your last address from your last transaction. And then there's another one where it's a clipboard hijacking. So it's a malware the hacker takes over your clipboard, and when you copy paste an address to send to, the hacker will replace the address that you copy pasted in your clipboard with the hacker's address. And now instead of sending wherever you want to send, you're sending to the hacker. So they will switch the address to the hacker's address.
To do that, they actually have to infiltrate your computer, right?
Malware. Yeah, essentially it's malware that takes over. Yeah, it takes over your clipboard, right? Yeah. So copy pasting can be very dangerous, on many fronts, on many levels. So, and actually, so I mentioned CCSS before. CCSS is really good for individual investors too, especially if you're custodying your own assets and you're high net worth individual and you're custodying a lot of money, not like $100, but like if you're custodying like over $100,000 or something, I would also recommend taking a course that we actually co-sponsored with another company called C4 that teaches you all of the aspects of key management and operational security when you're custodying your own assets, and it's specifically focused on cryptocurrency attack vectors. It's not going to teach you how to not get socially engineered, but if you do get socially engineered, a lot of times, if you have all of the CCSS principles in place, your money won't get stolen. So that's how it goes down deep into the core issue, which is like private key management. How do you manage your keys and store your keys and use your keys, right? So that's the best advice I can give. I mean, CCSS is just on point. A lot of really, really smart people, security engineers and professionals in crypto that have been doing this since Satoshi started this whole thing, they worked on the standard and they know exactly what attack vectors are the most popular ones. So
I'll be honest with you, after this, I'm probably going to take a course.
Yeah, I highly recommend. It's really, really good. It's really good about, because you can't prevent every type of social engineering, because social engineering happens because the attacker is very creative. Like they get really creative, and a lot of times, this attack, but then they find another way of doing it.
Yeah,
they find another way of doing you. So you can't know it all. But when it comes to like key management and just basic operational security, when you're custodying your own assets, you can learn that. It's really easy to learn. So that's my biggest advice.
No, I totally support you on this. Like, and it's so ironic. You would think that people who are like that smart, and that capable, basically they can create their own startup and be successful entrepreneurs, right? But they choose a different route, right? And it's basically, we have what we have. A little bit of statistics, in terms of like cyber criminals, they just in 2022 they stole $3.8 billion, right, according to Chainalysis, like one of the last reports. Right now, as of today, it already we have a slight increase, but again, the year is not ended yet, so it's like 3.3 billion, I think. So we'll see. Again, hopefully we'll have the world is going to be a better place and people stop just doing malicious activity, but we're also realistic, and thank you for what you're doing. Where can people find you? Where are you the most? Like I said, on Twitter, in terms of social media, or do you prefer LinkedIn?
So I do have a Twitter account, but it's not as active as my LinkedIn account. I'm definitely a lot more active on LinkedIn. So I came out of being a super secret squirrel special agent in the government. So I didn't have a lot of social media. So LinkedIn is what I'm comfortable with. Everything else is, I'm still learning to be comfortable with having social media. So definitely LinkedIn would be where you would find me most active on a daily basis, usually, or on a weekly basis.
One thing that I didn't notify you, but I'm curious, we do it like an ad hoc, like a book recommendation on cybersecurity principles or something that related to cybersecurity. What will be your first guess?
Well, I would recommend highly The Lazarus Heist. It's about North Korean hackers, and it's fascinating. And the way they hack into our infrastructure, and now they've been going after crypto a lot more. But The Lazarus Heist kind of goes over the history of how North Koreans started attacking our infrastructure and financing their operations by stealing funds from initially traditional financial institutions and now crypto.
I think there is also there's a podcast, right? You know, that Lazarus Heist, right?
I haven't seen one, but I'll take a look. Maybe, yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, but I definitely, that's a great recommendation. Like, I just remember that there is also a podcast discussing this topic. Thank you. And then there's the last thing which I want to ask you. I never notify guests like about this. It's more like a very personal question, right? But I'm curious to hear what is your meaning of life for you?
It's a really important question, because not having meaning and purpose is a really sad state of being, right? So it's kind of important to have that. And I like to say, I want to have a net positive effect on this world before I leave. That's the main thing. Obviously, nobody's perfect. I make mistakes, but I want to do like the good stuff that I do. I want that to overpower the bad stuff, if there is any bad stuff at some point. So that's my main goal. My main meaning is to, live a good life, live a comfortable life, making sure I take care of my family and my friends, and have some kind of purpose when it comes to helping this world be a little bit better than when I came into it. Maybe, I don't know. So yeah, I think that's, it's funny because my grandmother the other day was like, I explained to her what cryptocurrency was, because I went to my grandma's house because we were having some issues with, my grandpa went into the hospital, and I wanted to help her out deal with the whole situation. She doesn't speak English very well, so I needed to kind of help her navigate all that. But we ended up bonding a lot, and she didn't really know what I did. She didn't understand what I did, and she was shocked that I left my amazing, cushy, awesome job where I was well respected to like start my own business. She thought I was absolutely crazy. So she was really digging into it to see like, why would you do that? What is it that you actually do now that's so much better than what you were doing before? And I said, well, it's not really better, but it's different. And I explained to her what cryptocurrency was. And I explained to her what Bitcoin was and why it was created and how it was created and how it's a hedge against tyranny and a hedge against corruption and all of the bad human elements of society that are the cause of a lot of the misery in the world historically. And I told her, I said, well, my goal, my job is to prevent bad people from exploiting this technology so that it can grow and thrive, and so that people that need it can use it, because people do need it and will need it. And it is a hedge against tyranny. And I was so shocked that my grandmother actually understood how important crypto was, how important this development was and this technology was, and how important this invention was. Because my grandmother lived through the Soviet Union, she lived through World War II, she like lived through so much craziness and corruption and just misery in her life that she understood immediately when I told her it's a hedge against tyranny. It takes away that human element of corruption and centralization of power. And she just really like immediately understood it. And she said, you know what, I'm so proud of you. This is your calling in life. And this is such important work that you're doing, that you're championing this technology and you're preventing bad guys from exploiting it and from using it so that good people can use it. And that was just like, oh my gosh, my grandmother, my 90-year-old grandmother understood what it is and what I'm doing. And it was like so humbling to me. And I was just so shocked by this entire exchange because I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to explain to grandma what Bitcoin is and how mining works and why it's important, why there's no intermediary and how that's possible. There's no intermediary, it was good. So yeah.
I think it's a tribute. I think it's a tribute to your abilities to explain. It's like we can call it a grandma test. If you're able to explain to your grandma what is Bitcoin and you pass, that means you understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, and she doesn't just say, "Oh, okay, that's nice." She's like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! I didn't know this existed. That's revolutionary. You just opened my mind, and you're doing all these things to like help the technology. I'm so proud of you." Like, wow,
Well,
it was an incredible moment.
It is incredible. Lily, really appreciate what you do. Honestly, I wish, you personally on your journey of being an entrepreneur, a person who's trying to protect, like our industry, and not only an industry, just like people overall, as you mentioned, to make sure that the technology that is open to everyone is being used in a proper way, right? I really applaud what you're doing. I think it is important. So it was an honor talking to you and learning from you. So I hope, that people will take seriously your advices on the best practices in cybersecurity. We'll take the course, we'll learn more from you, and obviously we're going to share more content on this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.